So what to do if you've been contacted by Orbit Debt Collection Limited, also known as Orbit Debt. Hi, I'm Scott from MoneyNerd. It's my mission to arm you with knowledge so you can take back control of your finances. Today we're taking a look at the things you could do if you've been contacted by Orbit Debt Collection Limited. We're getting all of this information straight from my article on moneynerd.co.uk. It's got all of the information that we need, and I'm just going to summarize it in this video. Just to be clear, I don't give financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just making sure that you have access to the information that you need so you can make an informed decision about your finances. You've probably received a letter from Orbit Debt Collection or even had them knocking at your door. When our debt collectors chased me back in 2010, it caused me a lot of stress and anxiety, and to be honest, plenty of sleepless nights. But since then, I've worked in the credit card industry for over 10 years. I'm happy to say I've been able to use the information that's in this video to become debt-free. So today I'd like to answer 5 frequently asked questions like, are Orbit debt collectors even legitimate? How to reduce your repayment amount? How to stop Orbit debt collectors from contacting you? What happens to you if you ignore them? And what they're not allowed to do when they're collecting on your debts. So question number 1, are Orbit debt collectors even legitimate? Well, if you've received a letter from them in the post, this is probably your first question. If you don't recognise the company name, it might be that they've purchased your debt or they're a debt collector collecting on behalf of another company. I can confirm that Orbit Debt Collectors Limited is a UK registered company, and whilst there are a bunch of scams out there when it comes to debt collectors, I'm afraid this is unlikely to be a scam. However, you should never pay unless you're certain that the debt is yours. You're well within your rights to ask Orbit Debt Collectors if they can provide proof that the debt is yours. Now, I have a free letter template that you can use to confirm that the debt is yours and to confirm exactly how much you owe. It's totally free, and I'll link that in the description. Question number 2, what happens if you ignore Orbit debt collectors? Well, if you ignore debt collectors, your problem could escalate and become very serious. Orbit debt collectors do have the right to take court action against you, and if you were to ignore court letters, you could end up with a county court judgment or a CCJ. This can have a major impact on your credit score and your chances of borrowing money in the future. If you do get a CCJ and you still don't pay, this could ultimately result in bailiffs coming to your home to take your valuable items or even your car. There's a big difference between having debt collectors like Orbit chasing you and having bailiffs come to your home. So I can't urge you enough, now's the time to take action on your debts whilst you still have options available to you. So please don't ignore Orbit debt collectors, and we'll get to what you should do later in this video. Question number 3, what are the rules that Orbit debt collectors need to follow? Despite being legally appointed to collect your debt or outright owning your debt, there's several things that Orbit debt collectors can't do when it comes to collecting debts. Knowing what Orbit can and can't do will make you feel a lot more comfortable and confident when dealing with them. So here's the things they're legally not allowed to do. They're not allowed to visit your place of work unless you give them specific permission to do so. Before this rule was in place, some debt collectors would show up while they're working and try and make things awkward for you as a way of pressuring you into paying. And on a similar note, they're not allowed to speak to neighbours, friends or family about your debt. Again, this is to stop them trying to embarrass you or shame you into paying your debt. Orbit debt collectors can't contact you or visit your home at unreasonable times of the day. For phone calls, most people would agree that calls before 8 AM are too early and calls after 9 PM are too late. But your circumstances might be different, for example if you work night shifts. If you can't take calls during certain times, then tell them. They should be able to keep a record of this and avoid calling you during these times. And by the way, for home visits, the regulations say that debt collectors need to clearly explain the purpose and the intended outcome of the proposed visit, and they need to give you adequate notice of the date and the likely time of the visit. You're well within your rights to complain if they keep calling you or visiting your homes at times you've told them to avoid. Next, it's also good to know that they're not allowed to act in a threatening or intimidating way. They should never pressurise you into paying larger instalments than you can afford or hitting payment deadlines that are impossible. The regulations also say that they're not allowed to pressure you into selling your home or to take out more credit to pay your debts. It's also good to know that debt collectors can't pretend to be bailiffs or enforcement agents. Unlike bailiffs, debt collectors can't force their way into your house, and they can't refuse to leave if you ask them to. And they're certainly not allowed to take any of your belongings or clamp your car. Okay, question number 4. How long can you be chased for debt? Well, under the Limitation Act of 1980, creditors have 6 years to chase most unsecured unpaid debts, or 12 years for some mortgage debts. This limitation period starts from the time of your last payment, or when you last acknowledged the debt. Ultimately, debt collectors can't enforce their debts through the courts after 6 years, but if you've already been taken to court and have a CCJ registered against you, unfortunately there's no end date for how long you can be chased. Question number 5. How do you pay less and come to an agreement with Orbit debt collectors? Well, there's a number of ways that you might be able to reduce the amount you repay. If Orbit are adding interest and charges to your debt, you could ask them to freeze them to help you get back on track and clear your debts quicker. Debt collectors are more likely to stop or reduce interest and charges if you can prove that you're in financial difficulties. You could maybe put together a budget showing your income and essential living costs so you can clearly demonstrate that you're in financial difficulties. You can also use that same budget to negotiate reduced payments. Again, for this, you'll need to show why you can't afford higher repayments. So make sure that you're showing your income and essential living costs so you can clearly demonstrate what you can afford. Sometimes debt collectors will only agree to reduce payments for a short period of time, and at the end of that period, they'll want an update on your situation. Other times, debt collectors will agree to much longer repayment periods, but all of this will totally depend on the nature of your debt and your individual circumstances. If you have the cash, you could make a full and final settlement offer. This is where you ask them if they'll accept a lump sum instead of the full balance that you owe on the debt. In return for that lump sum payment, some debt collectors will agree to write off the remainder of the debt. If you want to learn more about some of these debt solutions and potentially write off some of your debt, then you can complete a short form which is on my website. It takes less than 30 seconds to do. It's questions like, what is the total amount of your debt? How many people do you owe money to? What's your living situation? Really simple questions like that. It takes less than 30 seconds to do. And at the end, you'll be able to get access to the debt solutions that are available in the UK. So click the link in the description below and go and complete that now.